answer the question first that I raised in the JOT form, and that is, are adults or children more likely to have issues with substance abuse? And the answer is adults. Specifically, 18 to 26 is actually the worst demographic out of all the age groups, and that has been fairly consistent throughout some time now. That's not just, oh well, it's because they just came out of childhood, or these are the people this, or because of this. This has been historically about the age. So there's the answer to that question. Now we're going to talk about addiction a little bit more, but first of all, let's look at it with the focus of, why is this important as a CASA volunteer advocate? You know, how does this work? And as a CASA volunteer advocate, really what we want you to do is to be able to educate yourself and have an understanding about the power of addiction, about substance abuse and how it can lead to addiction, which is one of the great things that just was in that video that you just watched on the difference between substance abuse versus addiction. And then really be aware of resources that are in our communities. And let me talk about some. You're going to have some resources. There are the restoration centers in Junction City, or your community is going to have different things like this. However, that's just one part of it. Other parts of it that you need to think about are treatment facilities. Are they in-home? Are they not in-home? Are they outpatient, inpatient? Are they a halfway house? We do have some of those. And then one of the things to consider with regard to that is that halfway house able to take in children? So that the child would be living with the parent in a structured environment where there would be other adults and caregivers there, so that the parent can get their treatment but still be reunited with their child. And this is always a question. There's some things we need to think about, benefits and possible detriments. That we do have one such facility called the Oxford House here in our region, and so you need to be aware of some things like that. They also want to look, as an advocate, you want to look at what are the family resources. Do they have family members who can help support them through the struggle, who can be there? What kind of network do they have? Are they family? Are non-related kin? Whatnot? Because ultimately, if that child has been removed from the home and we're trying to ideally help the parent or parents with the substance abuse or addiction issues, we really would love to be able to help this family reintegrate. And if we can help that family overcome the addiction or the substance abuse, many times we can be successfully reintegrating that family back together. Things you do want to consider, though, when you're constantly thinking, can the child return home? Is it safe for that child to return home? The parent's ability to function in a caregiving role. Has the parent undergone whatever sort of treatment they need to? Are they on track to be able to take care of themselves and a child? There are always moments when you're parenting a child. If you've parented a child, you know there's moments where those children and life circumstances can stretch you to the max. Does the parent have the skills to be able to handle that appropriately and know when to call on a sponsor or someone, a mentor, to help them through those moments rather than reach back to that addiction or that substance, whether it be alcohol or drugs or whatnot? The child's health, their development, and their age. If you have a child that has a lot of health issues, it might be a slower progression home. From the standpoint, we want to make sure that there's enough supports in place and we're not overwhelming this parent or these parents that are trying to reintegrate the family together, but they've got other issues that they're trying to deal with, and it might just be too much, and we don't want to tip the scale in a direction that's not going to cause a successful reintegration. Their history of substance abuse and treatment has has treatment worked for them in the past? Has it not? Now, one of the things you do need to consider here is something like methamphetamines, which, although fentanyl is rapidly rising, methamphetamines are still the drug of choice, meth especially, in our community. So, as we can contemplate that, we know that methamphetamines, the rehabilitation centers are not as effective as if it's a cocaine addiction or something on that. Those can have really high success rates. The last statistic that I saw with regards to meth or methamphetamines are they have to go to rehab at least 7 times before they start even to get close to a 1% chance of kicking meth. Now, the great news is people can overcome an addiction to meth and methamphetamines. It can happen, but you've got to be aware that it's much more likely to have a relapse when we're talking about meth or methamphetamines. And therefore, we need to make sure that those strong supports are in place so that we don't, again, tip the scale in a direction that's not going to help the family be successful. The safety of the home, food, electricity, running water, those sort of things. Family supports. Again, it all comes down to the strengths of that family and where they can get that support. Their mentors, their family who can step in. What is the safety plan is going to be dependent on a lot of those different types of things. Available treatment resources. If you have to wait 6 months to get into treatment, that's not going to be helpful for the case, because that's 6 months before we even really start treatment. That's not going to be helpful. So the availability of resources, or if they're dealing with a specific type of addiction, maybe they need some special treatments, and are they available, and how far away are they? Can transportation be provided if they don't have a vehicle, which a lot of our parents don't? Treatment, prognosis, and or length of sobriety. These are things that the court will look for. They've completed rehab and they're there and they have just gone the first 30 days and they in the halfway house, and the halfway house it's not an Oxford house, or they're at the Oxford house and they don't have space for the child to come with, or children to come with them, and they're there like, I've been doing it for 30 days, I'm good to go. They're not out in the real world yet. They're stepping their way there. I can tell you a lot of the judges would like to see, 2, 3, sometimes 6 months of sobriety if there have been in the history a lot of relapses, or a lot of history of beating the addiction, falling back in, beating the addiction, falling back in, beating the addiction, falling back in. And so what ends up happening is they want to see just a longer term before they close out the case. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they won't put the child back in the home, but it does mean that they are going to look for some serious sobriety before they close out that case. And so those are things that are really important to consider when you're going to make that recommendation for that reintegration. Now, a lot of this can be impacted by that Family First federal legislation that I've talked about, because there is this huge push to get the child back in home as quickly as possible. We just also want to make sure that it's going to last. My suggestion to everyone is always get them home as quickly as possible if it's going to be safe and stable, from the standpoint of we don't want to bring them back home and then have to remove them again because we didn't, it's better to wait an extra month or 6 weeks even, and then have it be 100% successful and the case never comes back, or we reintegrate too quickly, we overwhelm the parents, we overwhelm everything, and then we're like, okay, you got it, and then we step away too quick, and then we have to have another case, because that's just more trauma coming in at the end. So sometimes there's this balancing act of how quickly you want to reintegrate the family if they've been separated, versus you want to make sure that the reintegration is successful and they have what they need. So those are two things. So now we are going to talk, I'm going to have another video for you that I want you to see, and I've been trying to pull in these YouTube videos because I like to find more recent information than a lot of times, but about directly impacting substance abuse and parenting. We will be talking about this a lot more in our interactive session, and we've got a couple of case studies that just specifically deal with this for us to kind of work through. And so I really, really want you to watch this next video. I'll ask a couple of questions, but be in mind, like, substance abuse and parenting, that is definitely a balancing act that we need to be aware of. So, that being said, I invite you to watch this next video.